Hello, so welcome back. In this video I'd like to show you how to create methods in Java. So let's talk about methods first. So in method is a function, okay? It's pretty much function, but in Java we just call methods. Okay, so in math we call functions. So for example, if I have a function f of x, I say the implementation in Java we call implementation of the code. In math we just has an expressions x plus 1. So now if I call the function to use, so in Java we're going to call the method to use, okay? So let me use some of terminology. So in math we call expression, but in Java, like in math we call methods. In math we call functions. In Java we call methods. In math we call expression. In Java we call implementation. Now, so we call the function to use by passing an argument. Okay, so number 5 that you see we call argument. Okay, now in the expression in math we have x, we call parameter. Okay, so this is just some of the terminology before we start out. So 5 is an argument. If we pass in an argument to use this function, we will get 5 plus 1 by substituting the x, and the answer for this function will be 6. Okay, so now again in Java we call implementation of these expressions, right? And we still call the same argument and parameters. Parameter is the x and argument is the values that you substitute in. Now in Java we like to call the method, okay, to use, which is in math we just use a function called the method. So let's see how we doing this f of x in Java. So we're going to create a method. So by default we already know how to create the method, which is a main method. So I have a class named the method demo, which have a main method main. So this is the name of the methods. So same thing, if I want to create a method, I'm going to call the method. And before creating the method, like I said, I'm going to call it f, just like a function of f, which is in Java we call a method name f. So name main, this is name main, this is the method main. So the method main is going to call the method f of x, okay, call the method f of x to use. Okay, so there are two methods main, and we could create another method f of x. You may see main also have a parameters. Say the parameter name is the args, which is a type of string, and array. When you see a bracket, this is an arrays. Now this method also have a type, which is void as a type. Now the method can be a void if the method do not return. So the returns mean, like for example 5 plus 1 equal to 6. Okay, if I just print it out 6, I'm not returning. But if I say I want to know, like for example I have a method or function g called g of fx, right? So that means function g use function of fx. So in this case, our g is just like a main function or main method in Java. So main method call f of x, right? In this case, like g of fx equals to, we try to simplify this in math. So if you do not understand a function in math, you might need to review that. So we will say g of fx equals to some function, could be x plus 12. So that means what is the value of x? So we can say g, if I say x is 1, so the answer should be, first we have to say, we have to find when fx is 1, which is 1 plus 1, we have 2. So that means g of 2. So 2 becomes the new x here, which is going to be 2 plus 12. Now it's equals to 14. So as I say, since function of g called function of f, and function of f going to return the value of 2 back to function of g. So in this case, the function returns which the method can return to. The method returns. So the method returns, if I talk about in Java, so f of 1 returns 2. Now in Java we need to give the type 2 is an int, so we need to define the type here. So in this case, we want a function to be an integer if the function need to return. So I start the implementation of the function which using curly braces and close curly braces, and inside the function we going to give x. X is number 1. In Java you have to give the data type which is int x. Alright, so now we see the method has the name. The method has modifier as public. Public means this function can use anywhere, okay, anywhere with any expression, everything. So same, if I say public, I share this everywhere else. Okay, so now if it's private, that means this will not valid outside of the class method demo. But if it's public, that means it can be used everywhere. Okay, now let's look at how we're going to fix these errors a little bit. If you see the errors, this method must return, right? So main we not return anything, that's why its type is void. Why it's just like the method that not return anything. So if I want to return, I need to type return. So what we try to return, we say the implementation is x plus 1. So it's going to return x plus 1. So we're done with creating the methods. Now we're going to make just like g of x. Now in this case, our g is the main in Java and try to call f of x to use. So we said system.out.print. Okay, so let's test with f of x when f of x is equals to 1. Now that's one thing that we need to know, that when the method is the main method is static, we need to make another method as statics in order to let the static method use another method. Another method must be statics. Okay, and we'll cover the concept of statics later. So now let's see, if I print this, I should get the answer out as 2 because I passed 1 in, and we get 2 out. Like I said, if main is the g of fx, we can just say okay, plus 12. After that, if we plus 12, so that means we get 2 returns and plus another 12, we should have get 14 print out, which we get that. Alright, so that's how we create method to use in Java. Now that's more about methods, so I try to compare this into a map term. Now you don't have to think about this as a map. It can be any other name too. Like for example, I want to say public void output. Alright, so I want to create a method to do output, just like when you use system.out.println. This is your method named println. So I want to create a method named output. So instead of using system.out.println, I can actually say output. And again, I have to make this method statics, right? Because using in statics main. Now output, since it's void, that means it's not returning anything. And this method have a parameter that I need to pass the integer type. These are integer ways. Say 2 plus 12, this is 14, this is integer. So I'm going to take the integer out. And you may see the scope of your variables here. Like the scope of int x only valid inside a method f. Okay, so if I use the same x again here, this x will only valid inside the method output. So they're not going to be confusing between this x or this x, because this is only x valid inside f, and this x only valid inside output. So this output, pretty much I want to say print x. Okay, so you may see that I just created another method named output. Okay, to just, we know that output is going to just display. So when I run the program, so I got the 14, just the same. Now everything else is called methods. How many methods we have? Main, f, and output. We have 3 methods. So if you want the user to input something, we can just create a method name public static. And if the user input something, you may want ask user to input number of the x and pass the x in here. So I'm going to call the method input. So when you input, you can actually call, this is like f of x, f of gx. That means you can actually call another method inside this to return back up, and this input is going to return. So I want to make this to return an integer and name input. Okay, so now the method can have parameters, right? In the case that you need the parameters like this to calculate, okay, or to display. The method can have no parameters. Like in the case of input, I just want to maybe use scanner in here. So scanner, right, keyboard equals to new scanner system.in. Alright, so I need to import this scanner, and now I'm going to read in from user input. So I might want to just prompt the user, say enter a number. something like that. Okay, so after user enter the number, then I want the, so this whole thing is about input. So I want this number to return. So I just say returned. So we just do keyword at next int. So read the number that user entered and return back. So that means it's going to return into function of f of x. So input just like an x instead now. Alright, so now let's run the program and see what we get here. Alright, so let me make sure I save this. Enter a number. If I enter 1, I get a 14 out too. And you may see that our main is only one line of code now, instead of multiple line of codes when you use method. So the benefit of the method is to simplify your main implementations right here. Make the code easier to read. Right, so you say, okay, I want to output the function that get input from the user, right, and plus 12. That's just very easy to read. Now, like I said, you can do even more than this. Like for example, if I want to create a method to find the power of the user, power square, okay, or cube, or whatever the user input in. Okay, so I would say public, and say statics, and it's gonna return a power. I just call power, okay, or just say square because we want the square. So this method going to take the number as an argument and pretty much just square it. That means this method going to return x times x. That means square, right? So I can also create another method which do the find the cube, right? So I'm going to call cube, CUB, and this method also going to take parameters and return. Cube means you multiply 3 times. Now I just create a method that we can just use square or cube. So now let's say I'm going to ask user to input something, right? So after user input, I'm going to output, right? Output the, I'm going to say, okay, I may want to say input and output the square of the user input number, right? And another one I can say square of the user input number. Just be careful on the number of parentheses now. So I want to output the cube of the user input number. Okay, so let's run the program and see how it works. So the first one should belong to the f function. I put 1, I get 14. Now the second one prompt for the square. So I put 2, I should get 4 out. The third one prompt for the cube. Put 2, I get 8 out. 2 times 2 times 2. So this is how the method works, and you may see that this really simplifies your program, make it easy to read and understand. Alright, so thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoyed this video.